The tyres are the only point of contact between the car and the track. As a result, understanding how these tyres work is very important if you want to better understand how F1 cars function and handle. So, join us as we explain the properties of F1 tyres, the differences between the tyre compounds, and how drivers can maximise their performance. Tyres are the most important aspect of modern Grand Prix racing, perhaps the most perplexing aspect. Teams are given different sets to use at different times, and the process is managed by a large group of people. It wasn't always this complicated, but the introduction of a wide range of different tyres has transformed the sport into a complex game of strategy. We'll look into what goes into getting that right. Pirelli has been the current supplier since 2011. They replaced Bridgestone, which prior to that had been the sole supplier since its competitor Michelin dropped out of the sport in 2007. Since 2007, when the FIA decided to limit competition to prevent escalating costs and help reduce performance gaps between different teams, F1 has had a single tyre supplier at a time. It hasn't always been a one-off show though. In the 1950s, there were 5 different manufacturers involved, and since the beginning of the World Championship, F1 has had 9 manufacturers: Avon, Bridgestone, Continental, Dunlop, Engelbert, Firestone, Goodyear and Michelin. When Pirelli first entered Formula 1, the company was instructed to deliberately design tyres that would not last the entire race. The goal was to force teams to make more pit stops, making racing less predictable. New regulations were implemented in 2017, and modifications have been made since then, with the most recent changes to a stiffer construction completed for 2022 to make the tyres stronger and more durable. But how do Pirelli F1 tyres differ from, say, the ones on your Civic? The tyres used by an F1 car are highly engineered and complex, and they differ significantly from those used on passenger cars. The most notable difference, at least on the dry compounds, is the lack of any tread pattern. They are known as slicks, but the name is a bit misleading because they are anything but slippery. This is because a tyre without treads creates the largest contact patch between it and the ground, maximising grip. The tyre deforming under load is another advantage of this slick tyre design. Tyre grooves increase the rubber's willingness to deform under load. Thus, slicks have a unique perk because the reduced deformation means the tyre can be made of a softer compound without overheating or blistering. But why would you want to make tyres from softer compounds? The answer is complicated, and it is true that softer does not always mean better. For example, F1 teams have access to 3 compounds per week, with varying degrees of rubber softness. The tyre's level of grip is determined by the formulation of the compound that makes up the tyre's surface. Every tyre is made with a different rubber recipe, and the choice between softer and harder tyres is all about balancing durability and speed. How this rubber interacts with the track determines how fast and durable it can be, and the tyre's stiffness determines that interaction. In short, the softer the tyre, the better it can squeeze between the grooves and rocks in the asphalt, and thus more effectively grip the track. This comes at the expense of durability, as the tyre generates more friction and thus heat, degrading the outer surface and resulting in a loss of grip over time. So, let's go over the various compounds. The hard C1 tyre is ideal for tracks with fast, sweeping corners, abrasive surfaces, and high ambient temperatures. It takes longer to warm up and become grippy, but is extremely durable and can withstand harsh conditions for an extended period of time. The C3 is the most commonly used tyre, while the C5 is the fastest, suitable for tighter, twistier circuits and times such as qualifying when the focus is on peak performance rather than wear because it only lasts a few laps. No less than 2 weeks before each race, teams are informed of the tyre specifications that will be used. This defines the 3 dry tyre specifications available, 2 of which must be used in the race and 1 if a car advances to the final round of qualifying. The supplier presents and hands all sets of tyres to the FIA technical delegate at each race. The FIA assigns all the different sets to the cars to ensure independence and avoid bias. Each team is given sets of 13 dry tyres to use over the weekend, including 2 sets of hards, 3 sets of mediums, and 8 sets of softs. In addition, they receive 4 sets of intermediate tyres and 3 sets of full wets. If either of the Friday practice sessions, FP1 or FP2, are wet, or if the Saturday morning session, FP3, looks like it will be wet, teams get another set of inters to play with, but they must return a used set before qualifying begins. This is where things get complicated. Tyre usage is strictly monitored through the use of a digital tagging system, which allows teams to pick up, return, and swap tyres throughout the weekend. Teams must choose one of the 13 dry sets to be used only during the first 40 minutes of first practice and return that set and one more set within 2 hours of the end of FP1. 2 more sets return within 2 hours of the end of FP2, and 2 more return within 2 hours of the end of FP3. All teams must keep a fresh set of the softest compound tyre on hand for the final round of qualifying, Q3 if they qualify. All cars in Q3 must then use that set during the top 10 shootout and return a used set of that type within 3.5 hours of qualifying finishing. During the race, drivers must use at least 2 types of dry tyres. At least one of these must be one of the previously mentioned mandatory race specs. If it rains, intermediate or wet tyres are used, and drivers are not required to change tyres if they don't want to. This rarely happens though. Esteban Ocon became the first driver in 24 years not to stop for tyres in the 2021 Turkish Grand Prix. But that's not all. Before the race, each team is given a set of starting parameters for their tyres, including the pressure that they must run, the maximum temperatures the tyres can be heated up to in their tyre blankets, and the camber angle they must set. All of these are individually set and calculated by Pirelli, based on data supplied by the teams. Once on track, pressures and temperatures vary depending on the conditions. Tyre pressures drop as temperature drops, or vice versa, and there are no rules dictating what these must be, partly because there would be no way to enforce them. The starting parameters are intended to ensure safe running loads when the race begins, but the lower the tyre pressure, the greater the potential grip as long as the compound is operating within the proper operating temperature window. You can bet that the teams will try if there are ways to exploit it. However, 2022's tyres include a standard sensor controlled by the FIA. This allows them to continuously monitor the running pressures and keep a closer eye on the tyres to potentially warn of impending failures before they occur. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. And don't forget to click the notification bell to be notified of future uploads. What do you think about the state of the tyre regulations in this sport? Are the FIA placing too many rules and discouraging innovation? Let us know down below.